Welcome back in to Lettermen Live, presented, of course, by Wendy's. That's Andy. I'm Spencer. But you already know that. It's Lettermen Live. It's presented by Wendy's. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? I ask you every week because I want you all to have them covered in sauce, because Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or real heat seekers know, the ball knowers. Try spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before for a whole new way to nug. It's got to be Wendy's. A participating U.S. Wendy's. Andy, what's up, man? We're gonna do a shorter show here because it's Ohio State Purdue. Next week we'll get back on it with Ohio State Northwestern and get on to a couple better matchups. But first of all, how are you? Second of all, this is a little bit of a rough one.
Yeah, I'm doing well. But I think the exciting thing about games like this is that we'll see some of that young talent for Ohio State. I'm thinking last year, it was Minnesota, Michigan State stretch right before the Michigan game. There was a lot of opportunities for some of those younger guys to play. We saw Malik Hartford make his second start and kind of get a little bit of a do-over from the Youngstown State game. We also saw some Calvin Simpson-Hunt. Across the board, defensively especially, there were guys that got the step up. And, one name that I'm thinking of, and this is probably getting too ahead of the game, but Mylan Graham, maybe this is the time we see someone like that step up in this 2-week stretch. So I think there are some silver linings with games like this, even though it does feel like a complete hiccup to the 2 or 3 games against top 5 road opponents. But there are some fun little nuggets here and there, and no pun intended with our Wendy's ad, but just some little things you can get to watch, I guess, in these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, to be clear, we will never complain about 100,000 in the horseshoe. I want to be clear. Like, we only get 6 to 8 of those a year, and we'll take every one we can get. We only get 12 guaranteed chances to watch the Buckeyes every year. We'll take every one of those we can get. But do you remember? Well, actually, you might not remember, but this reminds me, and I'm sure the 41-year vet Tim May would agree with me. This reminds me a lot of those old Rutgers games against like the 2019 Rutgers team, the 2021 Rutgers team, or even like the 2016 Rutgers game, where it's like, this is going to be, unless Ohio State just like completely has a no-show, and I'm talking like even worse than like the Nebraska game, then this is going to be probably a blowout. So like you have to really dig in, and that's what we're going to do here. We'll talk some young guys we want to see. I'm glad you jumped the gun there a little bit, because we will talk about that. We're not going to skip keys to the game just because it's an opponent that's not having a good year and doesn't look like it's going to be a very, very fun afternoon for them in the horseshoe. But yeah, it just kind of reminds me of those old Purdue games and maybe the Maryland games where you knew what was going to happen. You just brace for impact, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you look at Purdue. Here's some stats I'll rattle off. So they're dead last in the Big Ten in rushing defense. They're giving up 203.3 rushing yards per game. So that bodes well for Ohio State, trying to continue to build on its rushing success against Penn State. And then also for Purdue, again, this is the thing, right? They're in their second year under Ryan Walters, who this could be the second and final year, unfortunately for him. But he's a defensive head coach. And right now, nothing's going right for that defense. So they're giving up 36.9 points per game, and they've only created 5 takeaways all season. So if you're looking for Will Howard to get back on track without having a turnover, because as great as he's been at times, he has had a tendency to turn the ball over, which is kind of been something that's followed him through his career in college. This could be a get-right game in that regard of just having a clean sheet and getting out of there with 0 interceptions, 0 fumbles.
Yeah, Purdue, another stat for you. Purdue is dead last in the Big Ten, 203.2 rushing yards allowed per game. Notre Dame ran for 362 on them. Oregon State got to 341. They've slowly been better. They gave 200 4 weeks ago, 180 3 weeks ago. I think it was 160 some 2 weeks ago, and last week I think it was 122. So like it's a gradual improvement there. Kind of held Northwestern in check. You can take that for what it's worth, I suppose. In a 26-20 overtime loss. I did watch the Purdue Northwestern rewatch. I promise I did not sit down and watch that full game. I thought they exuded a lot Like I think they poured a lot into that one because they kind of I feel like they knew that was one that they could probably get. And ended up coming up short there. So, you don't want to sit here and just disparage because not every program can be Ohio State, to be clear. But, you kind of recognize what's going on here. It's not been good for Ryan Walters. It's not been good for Purdue this year. But the Buckeyes, to their credit, man, and Ryan Day's credit, he opened the press conference on Tuesday. And I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit, and then we'll get into the keys. He opened the press conference on Tuesday by being asked about Carson Hinsman, and he spun it into it was good, but last week I think he said Penn State is behind us. It's time to focus on Purdue. And I feel like that really set the tone for the entire week. The guys that we talked to on Wednesday night did not seem to be looking past Purdue. They were talking about it as an opportunity. They've all made sure to talk about how Purdue's playing better than their record. They've all made sure to talk about how they're doing some good things offensively. If you think that this team is just overlooking Purdue, Ryan Day set that tone on Tuesday, and I feel like it carried into Wednesday. They looked pretty locked in coming off the practice field. That's another reason why I keep saying things like this, because this Ohio State team just seems to be very locked in on the task at hand. They know that it's a 1 week at a time mentality. I think one of them even called it a playoff game because they feel like every game is a playoff game right now to get to Indianapolis.
It is, because if they drop a game like this, they won't get to play in that game. They could theoretically, but they're running out of games for that to be mathematically possible. So realistically, yeah, they got to win every single game. And I think something that people don't like to talk about a lot, but everyone knows, is that Ryan Day hasn't dropped one of these games before. He's 44-0 against unranked opponents going into this game. And look, I get it. Like, you don't beat Michigan. You don't have a lot of success in the playoff. You haven't won a Big Ten title since 2020. People want to talk about that more. But I think something that people take for granted is that he just does not lose these games. And often it's not close at all. Sometimes there's a scare here and there. The Nebraska game is the one that comes to mind right now because that was just a couple of weeks ago. But usually it's a bloodbath, and it should be. And I think he deserves credit for that. And I know people often don't want to give it to him because there are those goals that he still needs to achieve. And it's totally respectable and valid to hold him accountable for those. But I do think it's noteworthy, and it's something that separates him, in my opinion, among most of the coaches in college football, is that he consistently finds ways to motivate his team to win these games and often handily. Like, it's one thing to get your guys motivated to play at Penn State. It's a top 5 game on the road. It's easy to get up for that. Same thing with the Oregon game. It's another to deliver against these Big Ten bottom dwellers. And I guess, yeah, we'll see how they do on Saturday, but I have full confidence they will, because Ryan Day has consistently done this throughout his career.
Yeah, he certainly has. It's been very impressive. They haven't lost to an unranked opponent at home since 2014 Virginia Tech, I believe, and that obviously predates the Ryan Day era. I'm sorry, they're just not. And maybe they're just feeding lip service to a fan base and the media who take them at their word at times. But the things that I heard this week were not the things that I heard prior to the Marshall game or prior to even the Nebraska game when they were coming off the Oregon loss. It is like a 1 week at a time deal for this team. They really, really want to play in Indianapolis. And look, they could go 11-1, and if the 1 made them not go to Indianapolis, they'd get the 5 seed. They'd play probably the group of 5 team, and then they'd get to play the 4th best conference champion. It's a pretty much an easy path for them to the semifinal. And maybe if you gave them truth serum, they'd say that'd be an acceptable path. But this team is full of a bunch of guys who have never played in Indianapolis and who really want to play in Indianapolis. They're tired of going over there for Big Ten Media Days and looking up at the stadium and wondering if that's where they're going to get, because those guys haven't been there. Marvin Harrison Jr. walked in there at 2023 Big Ten Media Days and said, I haven't been in this building. I want to be in this building. And he didn't get there. Denzel Burke, he wanted to be in that building. He's looking around. He wants to be there. They realize that if they win every game, they want to be in Indianapolis. They're going to get there. So, and they really, really, and I cannot stress this enough, really want to play Oregon again.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So like, I'm maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid, or, I'm drinking. Because maybe I am, but like I'm buying it that they're not overlooking this Purdue team, and maybe they can at halftime. But the first half, I think they're going to come out pretty locked in.
Yeah, maybe Ed's talking about us. I mean, we could be overlooking Purdue. That's certainly true.
Guilty.
Yeah, so that's valid if that's the case. I do think that it just stems from confidence in what this team has done to teams like this before.
Yeah.
You know, this is you look at Purdue's schedule. They've had a couple good fights over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and really since they made the change at offense coordinator Graham Harrell, they fired mid-season. A little bit surprising that just totally flopped. I thought that hire was actually a good one by Ryan Walters. It totally did not work out in Purdue. So they made the change in West Lafayette, and they moved to Jason Simmons, which is really or Simmons. Sorry, Jason Simmons, which is really interesting because he was an offensive analyst for the program, and now he's the offensive coordinator. And also, shout out to Joey Kaufman of the Columbus Dispatch for pointing this out. Jason Simmons was the coach at Ben Davis when DeJuan Jones was there. So like, or at least was there at one point, maybe not overlap, but he was a coach at Ben Davis. So just this is his only second year in college football and has had some immediate success with that offense. And if you look back at Ryan Day's comments this week, he was mainly talking about the Purdue offense. And I think it has been interesting to see the fact that they went toe-to-toe with Illinois in a game that they lost in overtime 50-49, and obviously put a lot of points on the board in that one. And then, you go along the schedule and you see them be quite competitive, most recently against Northwestern. So like they have had a little bit of life to them. Those are 2 overtime games that they lose, and we could be looking at a 3-win Purdue team right now instead of a 1-win. And maybe our conversation looks a little bit different tonight. But the fact of the matter is they only have 1 win to their name. And also the reality is, even during that stretch that Jason Simmons has taken over as offensive coordinator, look, you still have a 6-point outing against Wisconsin. You lose 52-6, and you've got a goose egg against Oregon. And I know it's Oregon, but you'd like to put up some kind of points in that kind of matchup. So it's been better at times, but not consistently. And they're still trying to figure out the quarterback situation. We've seen some Ryan Brown. I believe they're going with Hudson Card this week against Ohio State, which Ohio State saw Hudson Card last year in the game in West Lafayette. And a quite experienced quarterback, but he just doesn't have the resources at Purdue. That's been the problem. Last year, the offensive line didn't hold up. This year, it's been a bit more of the same. And, I think for this defense, it's an opportunity to keep building on what they've been doing for Ohio State.
Yeah, the defense is going to want a shutout because Oregon got a shutout. And that was at home. That was in West Lafayette for an Oregon team that was 6 days removed from beating Ohio State in the biggest home win in Oregon program history. And they still went on the road and got a shutout, 35-0. So Ohio State is going to, I'm assuming, use that as a motivation to try to get that. Whether they do, I don't know. I didn't pick a shutout, a little preview for Friday morning. But I did pick a few keys to the game, Andy, on lettermenrow.com. They're over there on the website right now. I'd love for you to go check them out. We've got 3 keys to the game from me. The first one is play your depth. Well, it's actually the third one, but I'm going to use it as the first one. Play your depth, and we'll get into that conversation at some point during this program. The second one is clean up the turnovers. They've had a turnover in 6 straight games. So clean it up. They've got 10 turnovers this year. They've only forced 11. So you'd like to get back on the winning side of those things. And creating turnovers. I know Davis and Igbinosun turned Penn State over. They got the turnover on downs, but that doesn't technically count. But, you kind of count that. You got to create turnovers, and you can't turn the ball over. Obviously, Will Howard had the 2 turnovers. It led to 14 points, 7 each direction. So you can't have that against good teams because Ohio State, quite frankly, should have blown Penn State out. But the fact of the matter is Will Howard turned the ball over twice, took away 7 points for Ohio State, gave Penn State 7. So that's the hard reality. Can't turn the ball over. And the third one is the Seth McLaughlin special. Run the ball.
Yeah.
Run the ball. So those are my 3. Do any of those hit your ears a certain way, some kind of way? And do you have an additional key to the game that you'd like to see?
Yeah, for your first question, I think it's interesting when we did our bowl predictions video, which will come out tomorrow for Lettermen Row with Tim May. Tim just a sneak peek, really believes they're going to air it out a little bit in this game, hit some explosives. I think, Spencer, you and I are in agreement that they're going to run the ball and they're going to hit that button pretty often early and throughout the game. And I think they really liked what they saw. Everyone did at Penn State. And I think a way to continue to build confidence is to keep doing that. And especially with a relatively, no, not even relatively, a new offensive line. It's a new group. You want to continue to fortify that chemistry that they're building, because the bottom line is, yeah, Carson Hinsman looked really great, but that was his first career start at left guard. That was Donovan Jackson's first career start at left tackle. You need to work with those guys, not only in pass protection, but also, arguably more importantly in the run game, because one advantage you have in pass pro is you got some running backs that are helping out. You got some tight ends that are helping out. And you've also got Will Howard in there that's pretty good at evading sacks. So I think it's better and more important to develop that run game. So I agree with you. I think they got to hammer that home, and especially against a really vulnerable, like, again, dead last, can't emphasize enough, dead last in the Big Ten in rushing defense, Purdue. Capitalize on that. Another key I would add is just, make a play on special teams, make a game-changing play on special teams. That was a theme this week that Ryan Day was mentioning, is they're not getting the output that they would want for the amount of work they're putting in. They're satisfied with the effort. It's not last year where they weren't. It almost felt like last year they didn't feel like they were disciplined. There was a lot of procedural penalties, just minor gaffes that couldn't be happening. For the most part this year, they've cleaned those up, but they still aren't making that big return. They're still one block away. They're still one cut away, and they want a game-changing play on special teams against a team like Purdue. Maybe that happens this week in the Horseshoe. So I don't know if that's a key to win the game, but I think that's a key to make yourself feel a lot better about that phase of the game. Coming off a game where you do have two big field goals that Jaden Fielding makes, and we can't forget about those. But as far as the return game goes, maybe bust one loose a little bit. They like the guys they have back there. They like Caleb Downs. They like Brandon Innes, of course, but he's still got to bust one loose.
Yeah, they definitely want. That's definitely on the bucket list for the 2024 Buckeyes, is to the Buckeye list, whatever. I tried. That's on the list. They want a special teams return. I think back to the first kickoff of the season. Ryan Day was quite frankly, he was pissed that they didn't house the opening kickoff of the season for a touchdown. He said we've got it blocked up and we didn't do it. We didn't execute. He was mad after a 52-6 win. So that's something that they definitely have been stressing. He said on Wednesday night, I think the exact verbiage was, it's been solid, but it hasn't been a plus.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a challenge that he's issuing there to his team, right? Like this week, let's make that a plus. I wouldn't be surprised if they try something on special teams at some point here in the next couple of weeks. I'll just briefly go through a couple of my keys, and you said that Tim talked about airing the ball out. I mean, this Purdue team is susceptible through the air. I mean, Wisconsin had 361 passing yards on Purdue. I don't think Wisconsin's had 361 passing yards in like 10 years combined. And Northwestern had 302 passing. Oregon kind of ran some vanilla stuff, so it's 290 passing, but they almost got there. Purdue runs a ton of man-to-man coverage. If you remember those Illinois defenses from a couple years ago under Ryan Walters with two bona fide NFL cornerbacks, they were running a lot of man-to-man. It was really successful because they had NFL cornerbacks. They don't have that right now at Purdue, and that's part of the struggles. It won't surprise me if Ohio State tries to create some balance in this offensive attack, but still stays kind of vanilla with what they do here. If you strip out the game against Indiana State, Purdue is average giving up 490 yards per game. That would rank 131st nationally out of 134, because in the opener against Indiana State, they give up 154 in a shutout 49-0 win. So you kind of strip that one out and you get the real data. They could go through the air. They could go on the ground. I think they're going to keep it on the ground because, like you said, the momentum that they created from that last drive last week was palpable. You could feel it even this week, kind of still resonating. Like, this offensive line wants more. They want to keep doing this. They want to physically dominate. This is a program that wants to be the most physically dominating and intimidating team in college football. and the hardest working team in college football. What do you need to do in the run game? You need to physically dominate. You need to impose your will. And you need to work really hard to open gaps in the run game. So, if this team wants to hang its hat on being a hardworking team, running the football would be the perfect identity for that. If they can form that identity and start to form it against Purdue after doing what they did against Penn State, I think that's a really good sign moving forward, even if it is against the worst run defense we've seen in the Big Ten in quite a while. Like, I still think there's a way to create some momentum here in the run game if you're Ohio State against a poor defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the beginning of the season. It can be a gateway to build on that, right? And we saw that a little bit with the schedule that Ohio State had. They had a lot of success running the football the first few games, and I honestly felt like they had success against Oregon in the first half of that game. It wasn't until there was an injury there to Josh Simmons that things got a little bit weird. You also had a moment there where Tager Shabola went out of that game, which I think people forget about. So there was some stuff going on in that one that I think maybe contributed to the inability to run the football in the second half. I think also just the fact that Ohio State was playing catch up. But, fair or unfair to evaluate that, it did lead into some struggles the following game against Nebraska where they switched things up because they had to with those injuries on the offensive line to Josh Simmons. They had Zem Mahalski in, and now it looks like they figured it out with Carson Hinsman and Donovan Jackson on left tackle. So, yeah, I'm in agreement. Like, to me, that's what I'm watching the most. I think this team can win a national championship if it run blocks and runs the football in general like it did last week against Penn State. Like, I think if it's that physical and it bullies teams around, they can win it all. But if it becomes imbalanced and you have to air it out more than you would like to, yeah, maybe you could win that way if you have CJ Stroud. And as much as I like Will Howard as a quarterback and as a leader of this team, because I think he's been great this year, I don't know if you have the weapon at quarterback to be able to solely rely on your pass game and win a national championship. And so you have to be physical. You have to have that balance. That's why they have Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. That's why they have Will Howard that can help them in the run game with his legs. Like, they aren't built to throw for 400 in a game. They want to run for 150 and throw for 300 or some kind of mix of that. They like to have 200 on the ground and 300 through the air. I think that's the ideal, but they want balance. And so, yeah, they got to run the football.
Yeah, my bold prediction for Friday was going to be about the run game, and it was honestly going to be 300 yards on the ground for Ohio State, which they haven't done since 2022 against Indiana in the snow game the week before the Michigan game. And then I let you go first, and you picked a run game prediction before me. So yeah. I gave you that one, I guess.
I think I said 250, which maybe
I wasn't going to give it away. I wasn't going to.
Yeah, well.
Andy's bold prediction, 250 yards rushing. There you have it.
You got to tune in to watch me wax poetic. Actually, I don't really remember what I said, but
yeah, you were kind of cooking there. Not gonna lie. All right. Any other keys before we get out of here and get on to some young guys we want to see?
They're gonna throw it around a little bit. Hudson Card will throw the football around quite a bit. I'm curious to still see these defensive backs be more consistent in coverage. Like Davidson Igbinosun headlined last week with the interception he made. That was an unbelievable play. He still has had trouble with holding and defensive pass interference penalties. Like the play right before the incredible interception, he was holding. I felt like there was a couple other times in the game he was holding and it wasn't called. Ohio State got away with a few penalties in that game, but that happens, and you'll take it if you're an Ohio State fan. But I do think Davidson Igbinosun still needs to clean some things up with his coverage. And I also think Denzel Burke still hasn't gotten back to the status of what he was last year. And I think he can get there, but it is still a process. Like a bad game since the Oregon game, but I also don't think he's, maybe returned to where he would like to be. He's made some really good plays in run defense, blown up screens as well. He's been good with his tackling, but I still think you're looking for maybe a little bit more out of those cornerbacks. And so I'm curious to see not only those two, but also how Jermaine Matthews does, because it feels like they're working him into the rotation a little bit more. And so kind of that threesome right there, how do they do, along with, of course, Jordan Hancock, who I think has been pretty solid this year.
Yeah. I like that. All right, let's dive in. I wrote lettermenrow.com on Wednesday. The week has been It's flown by, man. Actually, honestly, everything since the jeez, the Penn State game has kind of flown by. I wrote 6 guys that we need to see more of in the next couple weeks because Ohio State's probably going to be in the lead for most of these games. But I'll let you go first because I want to get your take on this because I've already talked about it a little bit this week, and the people at LettermenRow.com know that. Who do you want to see more of? Young guy, whether it's a veteran that that's playing well but doesn't get a lot of run, maybe like a Mitchell Melton, or somebody who didn't play a lot last week, Caden Curry, or if it is like a freshman that doesn't play at all that you really want to see more of, like who is it?
I think as a goal for Ohio State over these next 2 weeks, they should come out feeling really good about whoever their backup quarterback is. If that's going to be Devin Brown, I would assume it is still because we have been told otherwise. They need to get Devin Brown some opportunities to where they're feeling like, okay, he can consistently string together drives.
Yeah.
Boring drives. If it's not going to be Devin Brown and somehow in practice, Julian Sayin has surpassed him, you need to get him work. And you need to get him work regardless, probably just to kind of give him some more game reps going into next year. And so I think for me, I'm going to, not cop out with that answer, but like they need to figure out their backup quarterback to be very solid in that, because it did worry me a little bit with the dialogue leading up to the Penn State game. They backpedaled a little bit from like, we can't run our quarterback as much. And they ended up running Will Howard. Well, he had 12 carries. Not all those were by design, but they did let him run, especially at the end of the game, which I think they should. That's his strength. That's an X factor for him. But I think they need to be in a position where they feel really good about not worrying. Like, you never want him to get hurt, but you need to be prepared if he does. And I feel like they need to be more solid on their backup quarterback position. So they need to figure that out for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I like that. I won't talk about backup quarterback anymore. I will go ahead and talk about some of these young offensive weapons. Like, I want to see a lot more from Brandon Ennis. Like, he just earned your trust. Now put him on the field. If you score a touchdown in a top 5 game to take the lead for good on the road, I assume that they're going to be able to trust him the rest of the way. And if they don't, I think that's probably more on them than it is on Brandon, because there's not much else he can do short of catching the game-winning touchdown in the national championship game to earn the trust of the coaching staff than to go out there and execute on a play that Ryan Day said he didn't have a lot of reps on, and because Emeka got all the reps on that play, and then they call that play with Chip Kelly, dials it up for Brandon Ennis. He makes the 2 defenders collide when Trevion Henderson runs the opposite way. The defenders get swapped up. They collide. Brandon Ennis is wide open for a catch-and-run touchdown. There's no better way to earn trust there. And if you don't trust him after that, I don't know what to tell you. I want to see more of Brandon Ennis. And then he's been in the program since June now. He's a 5-star prospect. He's an absolute burner in the slot. I want to see Mylan Graham finally play a little bit. If they're going to be winning these games like this, and they're going to try to feel good about their backup quarterback, like you just said, I think Mylan Graham has a chance to finally be able to play a little bit. He has played in 1 game this year. He played 4 snaps against Western Michigan. I'd like to see him a little bit more, because we've seen in this program before, as the season goes on, freshman wide receivers have emerged. And I don't think he's going to emerge and like be a playmaker alongside Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. But God forbid, if somebody goes down, like, he might be a guy that you look at and say, like, all right, it's your turn. Your time is up. Your time is here. I want to see something from him that shows me, yeah, this is a former 5-star guy who we're going to rely on in the future.
Julian Sayin to Mylan Graham touchdown pass. I mean, look, last year's Purdue game, Brandon Ennis caught a touchdown from Devin Brown. And that was earlier in the season, actually. But I agree. That's why I mentioned kind of at the top of the show, Mylan Graham's one person who came to mind for this stretch of games, because you're right. You think about the redshirt rule. You get 4 before the postseason. You've only played 1 so far. You get them in for these 2 games. Maybe you have a 4th in case of emergency. You hold back just to be ready for. That's kind of a catastrophe thing. If you have a lot of guys go down, you need someone to play, then you got that 4th. So, yeah, I would expect him to play in both of these games. I don't know how much, but maybe total of 15 snaps, something like that. Maybe he catches a touchdown. That would be pretty cool. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think that kind of lines up with what they're probably thinking as well.
Yeah, and then obviously there's James Peoples, Sam Williams-Dixon. You want to get those guys some run, especially Peoples. Like, he's been really good when they've given him the football. I'm sure they want to get him some work. When I have a long day at work, Andy, even if I'm a role player, a backup player in any given day, when I have a long day at work, I immediately come home and all I want is those saucy nugs. Because I had the nugs dipped in sauce, but then when I had them covered in sauce, it changed my life. The Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them all the way up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, the real ball knowers, the heat seekers, the thrillers. They love the spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, Ed, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's, participating U.S. Wendy's. Saucy Nugget of the Week. The Wendy's Saucy Nugget of the Week. The Saucy Nugget of the Week is that Ohio State has not, and I've already said it, but has not lost to an unranked opponent since 2014. Ryan Day has never lost to an unranked Big Ten opponent. I think that is worth repeating for anybody who has some anxiety after the post-Nebraska anxiety. Or PNA, as we like to call it, because, I'm sure that there are people who think that Ohio State's going to sleepwalk through this, but rest assured, Buckeyes fans, this is not a game that Ryan Day often struggles with. Nebraska was truly a one-off in the Day era. That's the saucy nug. But if you have a saucy take, I would love to be able to rate it on a scale of honey barbecue to spicy ghost pepper. Give me one, Andy. Come on, I know you can conjure up one.
Well, I will get to one, but I also want to mention that they have not lost to Purdue at home since 1988. And yes, Ross-Ade Stadium has been a house of horrors. We talked about that, especially last year when they were going there. It's always the narrative of you never know what's going to happen when you go over there to West Lafayette. But here in Columbus, they have not lost a game since 1988. That season actually is really interesting. Ohio State only went 4-6-1. That was the start of the John Cooper era after Earl Bruce. So a little bit of a hiccup to start that era and before John Cooper got things going. So I just think that's an interesting thing to point out. Saucy take?
Yes, let me give it to me. Hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah. Man. I liked yours that I don't want to give away that you said on our video for Friday, but I'll just say this. I think that there'll be someone different scoring every touchdown in this game. There won't be any repeats. And I think that'll be a good thing for this team. Like, I really do believe this is the confidence that we were feeling in the building this week, I think was palpable. Like, it feels like they were really feeding off of what they had just accomplished at Penn State. And who knows what Penn State's going to do. Like, they might lose to Minnesota in a couple of weeks. Like, for all we know, who knows? But it doesn't matter because at that time, in that circumstance, in that environment, Ohio State got the job done. And to see, like, Caden McDonald just, giving off great vibes, great energy, constant smile, to see, Ty Hamilton feeling like, oh, yeah, this defense – he was saying how, maybe we were a little bit complacent at Oregon, but we've shifted things. Like, we are playing faster. We're not overthinking anymore. It's go, go, go. They've kind of flipped this switch. And I think with a lot of championship caliber teams, you look back at, like, what was that one game that was a turning point? I think for Ohio State, maybe you look back and this Penn State game is that turning point. Who knows? Maybe it wouldn't be. But for right now, it feels like it has the potential to be. And I think a big part of that is that so many guys were part of that Penn State game, which is where I'm going with this, is that so many guys I think will continue to be involved in these next 2 weeks. Like, they aren't just cutting out or, no one's turning off the brain right now, because when you have players like Edric Houston getting in and switching a role to playing more of that 3-tech and actually making an impact in a game like Penn State, and you have Hero Canoe and you have Caden McDonald making plays in that game. You have Jermaine Matthews, who's back more in a rotational role right now. You have Carson Hinsman coming off the bench and starring in a game on the offensive line. There's so much going on with the depth right now. It's not just a talking piece for the preseason. Like, we're seeing it in action. And now, not only did that just happen in a top 5 game, they get the perfect segue into 2 games where they can continue to build on that depth. It's not like, oh, okay, we used it there and then we won't use it again, or at the beginning of the season where you use it and then you don't use it again. This is, I think, actually a perfect setup after the Penn State game to continue to foster and kind of water that plant.
Yeah, I like that. Water that plant. I like that. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of guys are going to score. Friend of the program, our good buddy Berm, always talked with me about, and I remember hearing this, in these kind of games, like morale boost games. I think there's a name for them, but it's not coming to my head right now. It's like these guys all come to Ohio State as like 5 stars, especially on offense. And like, these are the kind of games where you can get them their touchdown, like, or their 3 or 4 catches to like, hey, we see the hard work you're putting in as a former 5-star guy who's not playing at all right now. Let's get him the football in a game like this. Like, I think this specifically, even more so than on the baseball field next week. And the puns for the baseball edition of this show next week are going to be fantastic. I think this is that week where, like, okay, let's get Brandon Innes another touchdown, or let's get Carnell Tate a touchdown. Let's get James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon in the end zone if they've been working hard. I'm not in practice. I don't know which of these guys they feel like they need to get but like, there are times where you don't want to do that to like embarrass an opponent, but you also want to make sure that your guys understand that, like, you see the hard work. And I think, or like, if you told me that Bennett Christian catches a touchdown in the next 2 weeks before Will Kazmarek comes back and kind of takes that playing time back, it won't surprise me at all, because, like, hey, you filled in a role. You did a nice job. Let's scheme something up and get this guy a touchdown. Thank you for your hard work. There was a couple Mitch Rossi touchdowns there in 2022 that I felt like were very much so like, thank you for your hard work touchdowns in blowouts. And like, there's
Patrick Gerd touchdown coming. Is that what you're saying?
Honestly, there could be. I just think that, like, there is a good time for you to give some of these guys some flowers where they don't always get recognition. And this could be the game that you do that in.
Well, also, let's keep in mind that there were situations like Ohio State's been very aggressive this year in late game situations, which I think is a good thing. I think there was a lot of complaints, and I kind of with fans on this one where Ryan Day late in games was taking the foot off the gas a little bit with the second team, third team offense, and we weren't really seeing anything. That 4th and 1 touchdown pass from Julian Sayin to Bennett Christian, I would be interested to talk to Bennett at the end of the season and be like, how much did that touchdown, even though it was in garbage time, give you more confidence for this season where he's played a big role, especially now that Will Kazmarek's out? Like, not only just as a receiver, because he's not super involved in that category, but like just as a player overall, like feeling like you belong, coming off that suspension, all that stuff. Like, those plays matter, not really in the box score, but like as far as like you're talking about the confidence, the morale. Like, Jelani Thurman could score a touchdown this game. Like, that feels right? Like, I feel like that wouldn't be that crazy. Hasn't had one yet in his career. Obviously had that juggling catch that Ryan Day said on the radio show today that he probably gained a year of his life, or lost a year of his life from that episode there. 3 drops and 3 catches in 1 play. But yeah, maybe he gets rewarded in the end zone. And you kind of go down the line of guys, typically underclassmen, maybe someone like Jaden Ballard, right? Like, someone who's been through it. Like, there are guys that, and again, it's not like a handout situation. It's not like, hey,
no,
here you go, freebie. They still have to earn it. I mean, like, Purdue's still going to play a football game here. And I think what we're talking about more is that there is a way to not sleepwalk through this game while also still playing your depth effectively. And I think that's the balance we're trying to toe the line of. I hope we're not just like saying, hey, they're going to have fun and he gets one and he gets one and he gets one. I don't think that's what we're really trying to say here. I think it's more of like, they're clearly overmatching Purdue on paper. If they execute the way they should have these opportunities to help guys take that next step in their development.
Yeah, I agree. But I will say, there's also the opportunity that they do every once in a while where they think like, who's our best Heisman candidate and how can we get him 4 touchdowns in this game? So
yeah, that was the Marv. Was that Marv at Rutgers late game where they like really were slow to start, and then the end they're like, all right, 2 touchdowns for Marvin, and then hey, here's the Heisman campaign.
Yeah, exactly. So like, if they did that to Jeremiah, That's why I'm going to give this take that you had, which multiple, every touchdown scored by somebody else. I will give it a garlic parm. It's not quite honey barbecue where like that's the default, like mild sauce, but like I think it's a step up from that because there is the possibility of that. I've got one. I'm going to make it really quick because we're going to be a little short this week. Excuse me. I think 3 different defensive backs are going to have a turnover in this game.
Wow.
Yeah, man. As long as the reason that I think this could be spicy ghost pepper, there is a world where Purdue exuded a lot of energy, like I said last week against Northwestern. Purdue has Penn State on deck like next week. Yes, next week. There's a world that Purdue just runs it a lot and takes its medicine. And I don't think that's I think that's a thing that teams do more often than you would realize in college football, where it's going to happen. So that's the possibility, but I also think that when they throw the ball, Ohio State is going to be pretty sticky against these receivers. And so, whether that's fumble recoveries, interceptions, things like that, I think I've got a pretty good one there.
I have a fun question for you before we, wrap things up here. Who do you think is the most legitimate Heisman candidate right now for this team? Like, they don't have anyone. They don't really have anyone on the top odds. I know that. I'm just saying that if you had to make a campaign for one of the players, who would it be? Like, I think we're really talking between Jeremiah and Will, but who are you picking?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody else, but the cop-out answer is the legitimate answer is like they don't have one, and that's okay.
Yeah. No,
it's very odd because they've had them so many times. And if we're being honest, if Will Howard scored the touchdown in which he fumbled through the end zone, and if he didn't throw the pick six, that's 2 passing touchdowns, no turnovers on the road at Penn State after he quite frankly played a masterful game against Oregon and just didn't get down in time. We don't talk about it because he didn't get down in time, but like he played incredibly in that game.
Yeah, he did.
So like the Penn State game, if you erase the turnovers, were like a Heisman moment for him because of the touchdown and the leadership and I guess battling back, but that would be nullified because there wouldn't have happened. And then you get Indiana, Michigan, and then a revenge spot against Oregon at the end of the year. Like that's probably the answer is still Will Howard because the moments could be there if a Jalen Milroe loses and a Jackson Dart lose and Travis Hunter doesn't play well in these next couple games or something, or God forbid he gets hurt, like there are still moments on this schedule that I think Will Howard could catapult himself up into that conversation. And maybe Ohio State makes it a goal to do that this week. Like, hey, has him have 6 touchdowns and start a campaign, like send Will to New York. But like, it's just one of those weird seasons where I don't see a candidate, and that's okay.
Yeah, and maybe that goes back to what we've been talking about throughout this whole show. It's just that it's more balanced and more depth oriented maybe than it has been in the past. Like, yeah, like Jeremiah doesn't have Marvin's numbers from last year, but you could argue that he's made a similar impact on the offense. And maybe it's for the best because one of the reasons why Marvin had his numbers that he did last year is because, well, obviously he's great. But the other is that Emeka Egbuka was out for 3 games and wasn't really himself and for another 2 games. And so you didn't have him. And then, you had Kate Silver, who was awesome at the tight end position. But beyond that, Carnell Tate hit a bit of a wall, I feel like, in his freshman year. And so they have just much more depth. And I think that's probably a reason why you don't have someone that's in that mix, maybe. And then defensively, like, yeah, you don't have any of those stat masters right now. Even Caleb Downs, like, I think that's been something that's been talked about this week. Like, yeah, he doesn't have the tackles that he did at Alabama, but that's also because, first of all, you don't really want your safeties leading the team in tackles. And second of all, like, it's more about what he does throughout the game in coverage and how he takes players away. Like, he made every tackle he needed to against Tyler Warren in that game last week. I think that was really important.
I agree. And I actually like this take down below from Danny. I think that it's good we don't have a Heisman candidate, and good we don't have an elite passing game like years past when Ohio State wins the Natty. It's so hard defense running the football and a gritty quarterback. The last two national championship quarterbacks for Ohio State were not the best quarterbacks in program history. JT Barrett / Cardale Jones and Craig Krenzel. So, it's – and both of those teams had elite defenses. Both those teams could run the absolute you-know-what out of the ball. So, there's something to be said about that if Ohio State gets the run game going this week, which brings us back to the very beginning of the show. Andy, give me 2 or 3 more minutes. I want to get your take on a couple things around the country. Georgia, Ole Miss, you got a quick pick there?
Yeah, Georgia. I feel like Ole Miss is going to be out of the playoff discussion after this week.
Thank God. Michigan, Indiana?
Indiana, and I don't think it will be a blowout. I actually kind of do like what Davis Warren has been showing the last couple of weeks, but Indiana.
Yeah, I just switched back from the schedule, and I think you put a hat on. It's a little trippy for me.
It's bothering me, man.
Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule. I'm flipping back to the screen. I'm like, whoa, it looks different. Alabama at LSU under the lights in Death Valley.
Yeah. Oh, this is another elimination game. I'm going Alabama. I know it's a different regime, but it just feels weird to bet against them in a game like this.
Yeah, I'm going LSU. I think I'll get Alabama out of the playoff. Let's go.
Is that because you want them out, or do you think they're actually going to lose?
I'm not on trial.
All right.
Okay. All right, I got 2 upset picks for you. I don't think they're going to necessarily be outright upsets, but I would be very, very tempted to bet the spreads if I was a betting man. Oh, wait, I am. Miami at Georgia Tech. Miami's an 11-point favorite. If Haynes King plays in that game for Georgia Tech, take the Jackets and take the points. Miami has not been 11 points better than most ACC teams it's played this year. I don't see how that's going to be any different in Bobby Dodd Stadium, even though they're the number 4 team in the country. And then one of the most surprising teams in the country for me is a 6-3 Texas Tech team that all of a sudden is in the hunt for the Big 12 championship.
Everyone's in the hunt for the Big 12 championship, though,
except for Kansas, and TCU and Oklahoma State. Those 3 teams are terrible. I'm curious about Colorado going to Texas Tech this week. Texas Tech is better than people realize, and Colorado's done this thing the last couple of years where just when you think that you can start to buy in, it's like, oh no. And I'm curious about that one. The spread is not big enough for me to endorse anything at Colorado -4. So you're banking on a field goal game there if you take Texas Tech, but it wouldn't surprise me if Texas Tech wins that game.
I'm going Colorado. I'm not saying I'm bought in on them winning the Big 12, but they've actually figured out a way to run the football recently, which I think was their big challenge. Can they actually have some balance on offense? They seem to have figured that out, and they can play a lick of defense now. I'm riding with Colorado in this game.
I like it. And then the very last thing I have for you. At the beginning of the year, Florida State at Notre Dame. Notre Dame was a 4-point favorite.
Yeah.
It is now a 26.5-point spread. The 1-8 Seminoles go play number 10 Notre Dame. I mean, that's wild to me. And I kind of want to find the people who can do the hypothetical spreads, who have contacts at some of the sports books and can phone in hey, what's the hypothetical spread on this? I want a hypothetical spread. If you're listening, one of the sports books, I'm not naming any of you because, hey, if you want to sponsor the show, we're more than welcome. We're open to anything at lettermenrow.com. What's the spread on a neutral field between 1-8 Florida State and 1-7 Purdue? I just want to know.
Yeah. Look, well, the problem with Florida State, Purdue at least has shown that it can score 40-plus points. Florida State just doesn't score. They just don't. They're 133rd in the country with 14.4 points per game. And I don't think they've been over 20 since their week 0 game against Georgia Tech in Dublin. So in the United States, they cannot score 20 points. They just cannot get there, which is absurd. You think about the talent that goes through that program, Yeah. I get they lost a lot of players, but man, they have major issues. And I kind of feel for Mike Norvell, man. Like, I've watched a lot of those pressers, and there's just nothing to say. There's just nothing to say at this point. The team is just bad.
Yeah, and when it rains, it pours. They just keep getting worse. Oh, well. Couldn't be me. All right. 50 minutes. Usually we're an hour. It's 50 minutes. I don't know. We've talked a lot this week about Ohio State Purdue. We've talked a lot based on Ohio State Penn State. If you've missed any of it, go to lettermenrow.com or here in the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. Make sure to like the video. Please like the video. It helps us out a ton, and it helps you guys out too because it gives you the satisfaction to know that you helped out a good friend through your screen here. And then subscribe to the YouTube channel because then you get notifications the next time we go live, which a nice little hint here will be next Thursday at 6:30 as we preview Ohio State Northwestern in the friendly confines at Wrigley Field. Lettermen Row will be there. We'll be in the Horseshoe on Saturday, and we will always be at lettermenrow.com. We'll see you guys over there at lettermenrow.com, and we'll see you on Saturday in the Horseshoe for Ohio State and Purdue.